Dan Primack.
I'm really excited about our next guest because we've been talking a lot about tech, and this is a tech company, but it is also primarily a healthcare company, and we're going to get to talk about a lot of stuff, including GLP-1s. So please welcome Zach Reitano, CEO, co-founder of Ro. Hey, Zach. How are you? Good. Oh, there's a pillow here under me. Here we go. So Zach, Ro gets founded originally to kind of reduce friction in healthcare, and primarily, at least at the beginning, it was kind of an ED drug telemedicine company. Who was this? Mashable wrote that your app, it sounded like something out of the TV show Silicon Valley, a Viagra app. Yeah. So when you started pitching this originally to VCs, what was their reaction? Sorry, move this.
Well, I can tell this part with a smile on my face because everyone in it is alive and doing well. And I'm sure my therapist would have a lot to say about what I'm about to say, but we started Ro very much inspired by my dad to recreate my dad with software, recreate the experience that I grew up with. So I have a congenital heart condition. Every person in my family has had some life-threatening illness. My sister, my mom, my dad's had 4 heart attacks and a stroke, and he's a physician. And he, saved every single one of our lives growing up. And when your dad's your doctor, they care about your health, but it's in service of you living a happy and fulfilled life. And so when we went in and we pitched, we said, yes, we're starting with ED, but it's the start of a relationship. It's this concept more broadly of goal-oriented healthcare, where we're going to start with what patients want, and we're going to work backwards, and we're going to deliver that in the most effective and convenient way. We definitely got a few laughs when people said, are you starting Harry's for Viagra? But for us, that was just, again, that's the starting point, and we've continued to add more and more products.
And you rebranded pretty quickly. You were originally called Roman. You rebranded relatively soon to Ro. Did you always know you were going to want to do both men's and women's health, or was that a pivot early on?
We knew we wanted to do both. How we would go about doing it, I think when we expanded beyond men's health, it was very fortuitous. We just dropped the man in Roman. So we were very lucky that way. That was a happy accident.
When did you find out, you have a primary rival and have almost since the beginning, which is Hims and now Hims and Hers. When did you learn of them?
It's fascinating to think about how these ideas sort of come about because they're based in SF. We were based in New York and we launched one day before they did. So we launched on October 31st, Halloween, in 2017, and they launched the next day. And I think while it's frustrating sometimes, overall I think it's been a tremendous motivator for the company, right? Competition is good, and it keeps us, we push one another, and it keeps us building the best product.
Do you remember your reaction when you heard of them?
We heard of them actually over the summer when we were both raising money. And companies try to do this where they go and try to get a little bit from everyone to block out their competitors, and we were both just trying to do that to one another. So it ended up happening.
It's interesting. Ozempic gets approved actually the same year, basically the same year you guys are founded, although albeit only for type 2 diabetes, didn't really hit the mainstream until much later, much more recently. Yeah. When did you start thinking about GLP-1s as being drugs that Ro should be offering?
Yeah. So we often talk about at Ro that you need data to move the brain, you need a story to move the heart, and you need both to move a human. And that was very much the case for us getting into obesity. So we've actually Ro celebrates its 7-year anniversary in a few days. And we've actually been helping patients with obesity for 4+ years. So we started with a product called Plenity, which is an FDA-approved device for weight loss. But we started and helped hundreds of thousands of patients start their weight loss journey. And we started with weight loss because it was actually one of the most common associated comorbidities that patients have when they came in with ED. So we've always been running after our customers. So we started with weight loss, we started with Plenity, and when Wegovy was approved, patients kept asking us about it. So I saw that happen, patients asking us about it, we're seeing it, we're always reading and looking at the pharmaceutical pipeline of new products and services that are coming out based on our existing categories. And then candidly, I saw the impact that it had on my dad's life. So that was sort of the story part. My dad's a physician, he lost 40 pounds on Ozempic. It radically changed his life, not only the weight loss, but his diabetes got under control. He's able to play with his grandkids and my nieces far more frequently and with far more energy. So it just radically changed his life.
Did you realize early on that this was going to become not just a category or a medication category that you guys were going to expand into, but this was going to become a dominant thing you guys were going to be moving into?
Candidly, I think this is one of those things where we made an uncomfortably large bet uncomfortably early from the outside's
What does that mean when you say we made a large bet?
We devoted a significant percentage of the organization to it far earlier than I think people would have wanted or expected. So this was late 21, early 22. And the reason we did so is because we thought that GLP-1 satisfied a set of criteria that's never before seen in healthcare. The majority of the US population is eligible for it, right? So 75% of the US population has overweight or has obesity. So majority of the US population is eligible for it. It's extremely effective. It's quite scalable. Providers want patients to have it, and patients desperately want it. Those 5 things have never happened in any drug category before. And so from our perspective, the prevalence and widespread usage of GLP-1s is inevitable, and we think that has a bunch of different, which we can talk about, bunch of different cascading impacts throughout the healthcare system and rippling beyond. But that to us is what led to us making such a large investment behind it, and it's obviously been one of the fastest growing parts.
Well, let's talk about it. You said to me recently that you feel that people, just in general, are overstating the short-term impact of GLP-1s and understating the long-term impact. What does that mean?
You're seeing in earnings calls, people mention it, and they're wondering whether people are purchasing fewer things at Walmart in mass because so many people are on GLP-1s, and the math right now just doesn't back that out. So there's probably about 5 to 6 million people on GLP-1s from a branded perspective for type 2 diabetes. Then there's probably another 1 to 2 million people, and you can see this, the number of units that are in supply. Probably another 1 to 2 million people on branded for obesity, whether that's cash and insurance. So when people say everyone who's taking it doesn't need it, functionally that's just mathematically not true. And then you have probably another 1 to 2 million people on compounded products. So you really have around 10 million people on these products and 5 million for type 2 diabetes. So you're not going to see it yet fully show up in a lot of the things where people think it could have the ripple effects, right? In the cases in the healthcare system of diabetes or procedures or devices or pulling a reduction in overall chronic disease, you're not going to see those things yet. But there's inklings of where if you sort of fast forward that movie, I think that there's probably about 40 million people in the US on statins, about 200 million worldwide on statins, and we think that they're going to be an order of magnitude greater in terms of adoption. You play out bottoms up when people are on GLP-1s, and we refer to it as a jetpack for positive behavior change. You see quite radical changes in behavior. So people reduce their calorie intake by about 20-30%, but then what they eat radically shifts. So they eat more poultry, more fish, more vegetables, more fruit. They consume less alcohol, less cookies, less soda. It also changes their behavior. They exercise twice as much. They buy more athleisure. They buy more lingerie. Maybe they date a little bit more. So you imagine that ripple effect through society.
Can I ask, you've got some money. You've taken some money off the table, Ro. Are you doing any personal investing based on those trends? I know a bunch of people who are shorting certain things, who are investing in other things that they think long term are going to be kind of GLP-1 driven.
No, I'm honestly I think the team probably makes fun of me, but I live in a very much a 15 block radius. I walk to work every day, spend 24/7 on Row, and then my wife and my 10-pound Australian Shepherd. So
do you feel? Do you think we'll get to a point and pick a time frame, 5 years, 10 years, where just like right now, if you've got a headache, it's not only socially acceptable, people take an aspirin. If you have seasonal allergies, you take an antihistamine. That's just kind of what we all do. Somebody's X pounds overweight, they drop a GLP-1, they take GLP-1s for a little bit. Is it going to become that just common and second nature? I
think so, definitely. I think you'll see people take it early and earlier, right? Rather than waiting for the negative thing to have already happened. We've been hoping people talk a lot about preventative health, but hopefully I do think that you'll see a tremendous amount of people not only take it once they have overweight or have obesity, but you are starting to see sort of weight agnostic health benefits. So you saw this in the clinical trials where they saw a reduction in heart attacks. You actually saw that reduction occur prior to patients seeing weight loss. So there's clearly weight agnostic effects. People think it could be the anti-inflammatory effects, but really positive impacts on a patient's overall health. So I think you're just going to see people take it earlier and earlier in their health journey.
Do you have any concern, given how much of the company you're betting on it? And I know GLP-1s have been around for a couple of decades now, but for very specific indications historically, not for broad population, like we were just discussing. Given how much you've bet on the company, do you have any concerns that there are going to be some, when we get to kind of broader categories of patients, that we're going to get some side effects data, which is going to hurt you guys financially?
Yeah. So a few things. I think that it would be sort of a misnomer to refer to these things as obesity drugs at this point, right? So they started for diabetes, and they've been helping patients with diabetes for about 2 decades, right? And they've been helping patients with obesity for about 10 years. And in 2008, the FDA actually raised the bar of new treatments that need to be approved for type 2 diabetes. You actually have to go through more advanced, there's a higher bar of cardiovascular outcome trials that need to be. So you have these drugs that are now treating diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and soon to be sleep apnea, chronic kidney disease, and a few other things. So the early data, I think we need to, in terms of the unknown side effects, hold a few things to be true. One is they've been treating patients for 2 decades. The randomized controlled trials had a higher bar that they needed to exceed. And then third is the early data on the breadth of the label and attacking the chronic conditions where we know the negative health outcomes if we don't do anything are quite impressive. But I think it would be really intellectually dishonest for us to say we're going to put, as a society, we'll put tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people on this new drug, and the only things we're going to learn are exclusively positive. That's hard to imagine. I think that wouldn't be intellectually honest, but thus far, the data that we have for the vast majority of people, not all, but that the benefits far outweigh the risks when looking forward.
What's the argument for why a patient is going to buy GLP-1s through Ro as opposed to buying them through their local get prescribed from their physician and get it prescribed? I think like with something like ED, I would assume a large part of that was embarrassment. Somebody didn't want to have that conversation face to face with the physician. Anyone who's ever been to a doctor knows the very first thing you do is go on a scale. The doctor knows immediately if you're overweight. Doctor certainly knows if you have diabetes.
Yeah.
Why is someone buying the stuff through you?
I kind of love this question because it's the same reason why people decide any product or service: cost, quality, and convenience, right? So it's far more convenient and they often get higher quality care. And then on the cost side, many people, while they might be covered for medication, it's very difficult to get that coverage. And so we have world-class sort of what we refer to as an insurance concierge, where anyone can come to Ro. So anyone in this audience can go to Ro and see if they're covered for these weight loss drugs, whether they're covered, whether prior auth's required, what the copay is. And then we actually will do a really great job at communicating that and fighting on their behalf with their insurance company. So you see a lot of—
You have your own blood lab too, is that correct?
We do have our own lab, yep. And so we actually have best-in-class prior authorization approval rates. A lot of other companies, let's say, will be in the 40 to 45% prior auth approval rates. We're in the 80% prior auth approval rate and can handle that fairly seamlessly, whereas your in-person doctor couldn't. So cost, quality, and convenience, and not having to trade off on any of those is usually the reason people—
You and I had coffee in Boston in the spring of 2023, and during that coffee, you mentioned that a majority of your new customers coming in at that moment were women. At this point, can you give me a sense, what's the gender breakdown of Ro customers? And granted, some of those women weren't for GLP-1, some were for fertility and other things. Right now, though, what's the gender breakdown of the company?
Our big 4 categories are metabolic health, sexual health, dermatology, and fertility. And that mix is fairly comparable from male, female in terms of 50-50. It varies within each product segment. But I sort of think the narrative violation that we normally have when we share the demographic data of the company is that it's far more representative of the entire US population. It's not coastal, it's not exclusively wealthy or lower income, it's fairly distributed. If you were to stack rank the US population by state, it pretty closely mirrors it. So, and the last thing is about 70% of our members are over 40, so people think it might be a young millennial brand, and that's just not the case.
Your rival Hims and Hers recently said they were going to buy a compounding pharmacy. Are you going to do the same?
We have one of the, you said we have our own lab. I think one of the things that has differentiated us from day one is the way that we work backwards from that concept of goal-oriented healthcare is, in our mind, we have to deliver the easiest and most effective experience from our patient's perspective. The way we have done that is vertical integration. So we built our EMR from scratch. We have our own CLIA certified and CAP accredited lab. We also own and operate 6 pharmacies distributed throughout the country. Several of those do compounding in-house, and it's that vertical integration that lets us deliver higher quality care.
Do you have any concerns? And tell me I'm wrong about this. I think your pharmacy, the compounders rather, are 503As and not 503Bs. And for those who don't know, which is probably almost everybody, 503Bs have slightly more stringent accreditation rules. You have the slightly less stringent. Why?
So you're right, there are 2 types of pharmacies. There's 503As and 503Bs. They serve each a different purpose. We partner with 503B pharmacies, and we have consistent—
what does it mean when you say you partner with them?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm asking you what it means. What does partner with them mean? If you have your own that are 503As, when does a drug that I get come from me?
503Bs are largely what are considered outsourcing facilities, so they can make anticipatory medication when they compound it, right? And what that means is they don't need to have a prescription prior to making medication, so they can make a batch of medication. From an inventory perspective, they follow, to your point, they follow CGMP manufacturing processes, and then they can ship it out to 503As or directly to a patient. We partner with 503Bs to ship it to our 503As before we ship it to a patient. In addition to that, our 503As follow CGMP practices. So we actually have we have raised the bar, and our team has a background in CGMP pharmaceutical manufacturing, and so we have consistent quality and safety protocols across our A's and B's, because whether it's coming from an A or a B, it's still going to one of our patients.
Ro has raised over $1 billion. I'm going to ask a question maybe on behalf of our next guest, who's the CEO of the NASDAQ. You've raised over $1 billion, but it's been a couple of years since you've raised. You were valued at 6.5 estimated last time. Why is Ro not a public company, or why have you not at least filed for an IPO?
I might give an unsatisfying answer, but the truth is that right now we are exclusively focused on delivering the highest quality product for our patients. And
but your CFO is focused on the financials, and I'm sure you've got somebody who's focused on making sure nobody jumps into the building who's not supposed to. You can do two things at once.
Yep. You want sort of you're asking for this super radical, transparent answer.
Oh, let me rephrase it.
Yeah.
Do you ever want to go public?
I think that if you zoom out and say, from a first principles perspective, why do companies go public? They do so if the primary reasons have been historically to raise capital or to create liquidity for employees and investors. And I think that can either be done as a public company, that it now can increasingly be done as a private company. There are also additional pros to being a public company. There's liquid stock to be able to do inorganic growth. So there are pros and cons to each approach, but I think that they are the benefits that exist in the private market, I think, are growing. And so I think we will just continue to put our hands
just a yes, no. Do you someday envision Ro as a public company?
We never say never.
That is not yes or no. But so two final quick questions since we have a minute left. Who do you view as a bigger long-term competitor to you? Is it Hims or is it Amazon?
Neither.
Now, what is it? Status quo?
It might be cheesy, but I think that we have this philosophy at Rose where we are customer obsessed and competitor aware, and companies rarely, if ever, put each other out of business. The companies that go out of business are the ones that...
Amazon puts a lot of companies out of business.
I don't think that's true. Who have they put out of business?
They put diapers out of business. Well, they bought them. First, they were going to put them out of business, and then they bought them.
There's like 3 companies over the last 30 years that they put out of business. The majority of companies put themselves out of business by not delivering amazing products and services for their customers year after year after year after year. Very rarely do any companies put themselves out of business. Or put each other out of business.
Final question. Presidential election is 2 weeks from today. And obviously healthcare is a big issue in this election. What, if anything, does the outcome of this election mean to your company and your users?
I think that they both have, the one thing I would say that seems to be spread across the aisle is drug pricing, and drug pricing in the US, and particularly GLP-1. So I think that we right now are paying 10 times the amount for GLP-1s that other patients or other individuals across other well-developed countries are paying. I think that's just untenable and unfair. And I think that it'll be interesting to see, depending on who gets elected, how hard they push.
Do you think from what you know, do you feel one candidate will push harder on that than the other?
I think that's actually the one thing that we can all agree on is we pay too much for branded drug prices, and that there's price distortion from PBMs. Everyone dislikes PBMs. We can at least... I think there's a lot of division right now in all of these different things, and I think it's actually a lot easier to say, what can we agree on that improves the lives of people who are living in this country? And I think that drug pricing and healthcare reform is one of the things where there's actually a lot of uniformity, and I think we can make progress there, where I think we do spend a lot of time. It's kind of surprising to me that people care what health tech CEOs have to say about the presidential election in the first place. But I do think that where there's alignment, we can actually make people's lives better, and we should just spend far more time there right now.
We have one more conversation before a break. Zach, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.